Good evening. In compliance with Chapter 551 Open Meetings of the Texas Government Code, I call to order a work session of the Board of Trustees of the Austin Independent School District for Thursday, April 30th, 2026 at 6:10 p.m. A quorum of the board is physically present at Austin ISD Central Office to conduct this meeting. This meeting is being broadcast on cable channel 22 through Spectrum, Astound Broadband, and on channel 99 through AT&T Uverse. Closed captioning in English is available on these platforms for individuals who are deaf or hard of hearing. Welcome and thank you for joining us. We provided an opportunity for public comment this evening, but there were no callers. We'll now move on to the work session, and I will turn it over to Katrina Montgomery, our Chief Financial Officer. Thank you, Ms. Montgomery.
Thank you very much, President Boswell. Hello, trustees. We're going to get started on our board budget work session. So this first document shows our general fund, and one of the things we've talked about is our preliminary budget. We are all clear that it has the deficit of $181 million, but we wanted to show a couple of different scenarios or options where if we kept our fund balance at 15%, 16%, or 17%. So the only change that you will see the 181 million consistently across as the gross deficit, and then you'll see property monetization that we have there for $50 million, and then you'll have reductions needed. So that's where we're going to spend a little time today. So for scenario A, for us to get to 15%, we'd have to reduce 127 million to get to plus the 50 million to get to the 181 million. For 16%, it will be 135 million, and for 17%, it will be 143 million. So when we're talking about the guardrails and the expectations from the board, we wanted to provide this information so that we can give you a little bit more clarity, so you can provide us information about where you would like us, what the expectation will be, and our guardrail for this year's budget. And on this next slide, we've gone over this slide before, and you see there's some prior years, FY 23, 24, 24, 25, and on, but we really want to spend a lot of time on the last two columns. We have on the second column from the right, the preliminary balance, and so this is where we built our preliminary budget on. And then in the final column, we have what we're working on now as our recommended budget. And so what you will see is we kept our adjusted enrollment number at the same. So we said we were going to keep that at a 4% decrease. And then we're working on changing our assumption for our vacancy savings. Year over year, we've used 2%, but we really do believe that we can increase this number. We just have to come up with a new percentage. And then we have our average daily attendance. So what we've landed on so far is doing our recommended budget. Okay, so let's go back to preliminary. We had done our ADA at a -3% and our property value at a -5%. And we've talked about why we took such great lengths to make sure that in the current fiscal year, we would not have to make reductions. So for the recommended budget, we're going to change our adjusted ADA to a -2%, and then our property value change at a -4%. And the reason why we feel comfortable doing the property value change is because from TCAD, Travis Central Appraisal District, is saying that our property values will come in at a -3%, so we're going to increase that to a -4%. And then our adjusted ADA, we're going to move that to a -2%. So those assumptions are going to change our deficit amount that we just talked about on the previous slide, but you will see that at the recommended budget. This next slide we presented at the previous board meeting, and one of our trustees asked to see, like, well, what happens if we do our property value change as a decrease as high as a -7%. So we've added some additional information at the top. You can see if there's a -7%, and then it would matter or depend on what your ADA, how the additional revenue will fluctuate. But again, if we stick with a negative property value change of 4%, 4% and a negative 2% of ADA change, that would be an additional $17.3 million to reduce the $181 million deficit. So these are the assumptions that we've landed with so far. We are going to continuously monitor our average daily attendance, and if we get any additional or updated information from TCAD, we will monitor those as well. So we wanted to spend some time talking about the budget survey data. We've received over 5,000 plus responses from our community as well as our staff. The feedback reflects a clear desire to protect our classrooms, our students and employees first, while seeking efficiencies elsewhere. And some of the top priorities that have been identified is protect our class size and classroom staffing, preserve planning minutes for teachers, maintain nurses, counselors, librarians, and TAs, protect employee health benefits and key stipends, specifically bilingual and special education, and maintain transportation for high need and special populations. And some of the common themes we've seen is reduce central office and administrative costs before campuses, review contracts, duplicate programs and software subscriptions, increase transparency on spending, staffing, and outcomes, use standard process to identify and evaluate funds to ensure alignment, and finally, seek new revenue through partnership leases, grants, and asset use. So the feedback that we're receiving, you can see, is information that we've all talked about before, but it's good to hear some of the same things from our community as well as staff. And on this next slide, we wanted to show the change in enrollment in ADA. So the box to the far left talks about our average daily attendance, and you can see it from 2018 through 2019. So in 2018, 2019, our average daily attendance was 72,688. And then we are going to go all the way down to 25-26. We adopted our budget at 64,100. And now at the end of the fifth 6 weeks, our average daily attendance is 61,864. So you can see the count change is 2,236 with the percentage change of 3.49. And so this is one of the reasons why I stated earlier we're going to continuously look at how we planned our budget on our average daily attendance assumption. So when we looked at this number before, it was closer to 3%, and we felt like it would be good for us to say that for next year, our average daily attendance would be at a negative 2%. But if this number continuously increases, then we're going to have to continuously update our assumptions. And then to the far right, you have our enrollment. Again, from 2018, 2019, we had 79,787 students. And then at the end of the fifth 6 weeks for enrollment, we had 69,225. And from adopted budget, our enrollment has decreased 3,078 students. So this is just information so we can review. The next slide is a graph of what we just talked about. The one thing I want to point out, which we've discussed before, is that our enrollment, we can clearly see that it's decreasing, but the one silver lining is that our average daily attendance is not decreasing to the same level of our enrollment. And the reason that's happening is because there is a concerted effort from our campus as well as our attendance team to make sure that we're taking attendance on time and our campuses are processing and getting support to do that. So even though our enrollment is decreasing 4%, our average daily attendance has only decreased 3%. This slide here is a budget breakdown, and so one of the things we want to talk about is how do the numbers add up. So this particular side is campuses and how do our campuses fare. So on this, you can see at the bottom, we have 9,006 employees that report to our campuses, and the budget is a total of $817.95 million. And in that, you can see you have high school at 1,684 for a total of 142.11. So we wanted to give data about how these numbers are impacted in our budget. And the final line here I want to talk about is other costs at district level. And so we keep this in one large bucket, but I want us to talk about what that is. So for the campuses, we have $23.2 million in stipends. Employee allowances is $0.5 million. Substitutes is $16.5 million. TRS on behalf is $42 million. TIA is $6.3 million. School improvement is $12.1 million. And then you have some other things, attendance incentive, literacy first, for a total of $6.9 million. But the most important part is I want us to remember this $817.95 million is what we currently spend on campus budgets. And then when we go to the next slide, you're gonna see the exact same thing for departments. So you have the breakout of departments, you have the FTE. So the total department count for FTEs is 1,006, and the budget is 213.03. And if you add the $213.03 million plus the 817.95, you get the total operating expenditures that we reviewed on the previous slide. The one thing that we don't spend a lot of time talking about that we need to be clear about is if you look at an example of operations, and even that it shows that operations has 335 positions for a total of 68.39, and that is on Christine's department budget. But we have 193 of those positions actually work on campuses. So even though I want us to be clear that when you see how much we have in departments, some of these people still report directly to campuses. So one of those, the largest example here would be operations. The other thing that I wanted to call out on this data is talent strategy. If you look, it shows 96 positions. And the reason I want to call this out is because we have a team that normally wouldn't directly report to talent strategy. And so I don't want us to think that talent strategy actually has 96 people working in their department. Of that, 24 FTEs are athletics, of which most of those people report to campuses or work directly with our students. And this next slide, we've gone over this and we've talked about where does our money go, and we want to just be really clear about 87 to 88% of our budget is payroll costs. And so that's what makes this work so challenging, because there's not a place where we can go in and just take a lot of funds. So when we talk about the previous slide, departments, even though we could make reductions from departments, and we know that that's still something that we have to do as a district, we still have some of those positions that are departments that directly impact our campuses. So 88% of our budget is actually payroll costs, 3.4% is contracted services, 7% is supplies, and then we have 0.80 as other. So this is all preliminary figures based on the information on our preliminary budget. And now I'm going to turn it over to Ms. Denisha Presley, and she's going to answer. She wants to give a little bit more information about where the district money goes, and then she's going to go in and start talking about staffing.
Yeah, so actually we can just go ahead and start. Can you hear me okay? Great. Start talking about the staffing portion. If you could go back, just go back one slide for a second. When Ms. Montgomery was talking, she talked about the 88% that goes to staffing. And when we talk about staffing, like, that is a broad term. And it's a broad term that encompasses hundreds and hundreds of, or thousands of employees, over 11,000 in our district, and hundreds of different job titles, right? So when we talk about staffing, we're talking about assistant superintendents, principals, teachers' assistants, teachers, counselors, librarians, right? So all that there's one term that says staffing. And so for the work that we're doing this evening, we want to engage you in a conversation about our methodologies and talent strategy and how we staff campuses. So this portion of our work will be directed to staffing. So on the next slide, thank you. I'd like for us to just keep these three things keep them in consideration as we walk through this work and really think about the correlation between the methodologies we use to staff campuses and our budget, right? Just focusing on that correlation. There are three considerations. One are ratios, because we've had conversations about ratios and what that could mean for staffing. And I just think it's important to know that this is an area that we could explore, and that may be refined based on grade level and special programming for campuses. But then there's also this consideration of weights, and we'll dig deep into weights tonight and what it means to have a weighted formula for staffing and distributing allocations to our campuses. And so when we talk about weights, one of the things we are constantly thinking about is, what does this mean? Because our weights align closely to what we say are our values in Austin ISD. And so we want to be extremely careful about moving weights or even, going into deep discussions about weights. If we want to pause on those until we can build out our academic vision, because we believe that the academic vision and the weights or our values are closely aligned, and we want to make sure that they stay aligned as we move through this process. And then the last is scheduling. So that's been an ongoing conversation among many groups in our district. And so we just want to make sure, that we are, as we talk about scheduling, that we're prioritizing teacher planning time, as that directly aligns to priority 1A. So keep those considerations in mind, or top of mind, as we move through our discussion. And so to talk about staffing, we want to give you a little bit of history, just thinking about where we started and how we got where we are. And so as far as our team has been digging deep and trying to figure out when we started adding weights to our allocations. And what we believe is, prior to 2021, allocations that were designated for campuses were built on enrollment, right? So your enrollment was the direct, we take our enrollment, we do the division, and we allocate the FTEs, or the teachers, assistant principals and counselors, to those campuses. In 2021 is when we see the first iteration of the way we staff campuses today. For secondary teachers, our allocations were weighted 1.2, and we also took into consideration our 1.2 for our economically disadvantaged populations on campus and for campus ratings. In 22-23, campus ratings went away. The weight for EcoDis campuses, or EcoDis populations, went to 1.1. And then the following year, we instated a minimum teacher FTE implemented for our secondary campuses. And so what that means is, regardless of the population, like the enrollment of your campus, so for example, if a campus might have 200, secondary campus might have 200 students enrolled, that might yield 12 FTEs, or allocations for teachers. But we believe in, or we have instated in 23-24, a minimum teacher FTE process for campuses, right? And so that's just something to take into consideration. It's not in writing. It's not in our compensation manual. It is in talent strategy, has been a way that things were done. And those additional FTEs, just to keep in mind, could be to support some of our elective classes, other programs that we might have in some of our campuses. So just keep that in mind. And then we also have the secondary teacher allocations based on EcoDisc, which is 1.15. And for our emergent bilingual populations, the weight is at 1.05. But then in the following year, our weight for EcoDisc goes up to 1.2. And our emergent bilingual population weight stays the same. So just kind of understanding, we'll dig deep into weights. We'll actually have you guys work through some of our formulas later on this afternoon to better understand how we staff our campuses. Mark?
Good evening, everyone. I'm Mark Gergel, Director of Staffing and Substitute Services. So looking at this next slide here, as we're looking at allocations across campuses, we have certain baseline standards They're based a lot on class size ratios, as Denisha just mentioned, but we also look at special program and campus needs. As she mentioned during the timeline, we also take into consideration weighted formulas depending on the campuses and positions for our students receiving special ed services, as well as our emergent bilingual and economically disadvantaged students. And then, of course, there are unique needs to every campus, and we do want to take the opportunity to revisit those needs to make sure that the students receive the services needed for those campuses. This next slide is a comparison of our current format that we utilize as we were building out for 26-27, and we've worked to update these guidelines and hopefully a more user-friendly, visible format. I believe these were shared with you earlier today or possibly yesterday for you to review and have access to. So I'm going to go into a little bit more detail now with some of the baseline staffing allocations. And so if you, starting on the left, it's the position, and then moving to the right, it's the different levels. So every campus is allocated one principal. And then if you look at the assistant principals, there's a minimum allocation of 1 at the elementary, 2 at the middle school, and 3 at the high school, regardless of student enrollment. But I also want to point out that there is a weighted formula that we'll get the opportunity to explore more in just a little bit based on the population of students receiving special ed services. In a similar fashion, you can see the same thing for counselors, where elementary school counselors, 1 minimum, for middle school it's 2, high school it's 3. And again, we will then implement a weighted formula based on the special education population. Baseline allocations for librarians and nurses remain the same for each of the different levels. Moving on to clerical, you can see a similar breakdown for the different levels based on student enrollment and the increases as the enrollment of the campus increases. We may see guidance counselors added, additional attendance specialists, additional clerks, accounting techs, so on and so forth to meet those needs. On this slide here, it drills down a little bit further now, looking at the elementary school teacher formula. So the ratio right now for pre-K 3 is 1 to 17. Currently, our pre-K 4 through 4th grade is 1 to 22. And starting in 5th grade, the ratio goes 1 to 25. There is 1 TA allocated for each pre-K teacher. Looking at the secondary level, you can see this is where for teachers, as Denisha just mentioned, we do look at the weighted formula, considering the ECODIS and the emergent bilingual population of those campuses. And currently, teachers are teaching 6 out of 8. The class ratio is 1 teacher for every 29 students. And it, again, as Denisha mentioned, every secondary campus right now is guaranteed a minimum of 20 teacher allocations. This slide here is an example where it drills down the information further for the board to review. So you can see the grade level on the left column, student enrollment, following the ratio that I mentioned before, 1 to 22. It indicates how many teachers would be allocated for the campus. And then finally, you can get an idea of what the possible class size might be for that campus. So for example, looking at the 1st grade row, 49 students with a ratio of 1 to 22 would yield 3 teacher allocations, and the anticipated class size for those 3 would be students 16, 16, and 17. I do want to
clarify what it means that it's an
They're not serving the bilingual dual language.
Okay, maybe after the meeting I can talk about that. I'd like to revisit that because that's, every campus is an ESL campus. Okay. And most students at an ESL campus are not ESL. So I'd like to clarify the language with you afterwards.
Thank you, Trustee Kaufman. And also want to point out that this currently does not include any special ed allocations. Those are provided separately by that department. So then to dive into this campus example a little bit further, this would include all of the allocations for the entire campus, from the principal, professional, classified an estimated cost, so an average salary, which does include benefits. And you can see we've added the special education allocations as provided by the special ed department in this particular example. And so this particular campus would have 45 allocations and an estimated cost of $3.3 million. That's just staffing. That doesn't include any non-staffing dollars. This is an example where we are supporting the dual language programming, and we have the separation of the classes based on the students. We work very closely with the multilingual education team on identifying those students to help us make sure that we have the right teacher allocations for those campuses. So in this particular example, again, same thing. If you look, for example, at the pre-K 4, if there's a total of 66 students anticipated enrolled in pre-K 4, and there's 40 ESL and 26 DL, that would yield 2 ESL teachers, 2 bilingual teachers. And again, in the far right, you can see the estimated class size for those teacher allocations. Again, as a reminder, this does not include any special education allocations. And then on the next slide, this is also similar to the campus before. This is a build out of the entire campus. It does include the special ed teachers as well as TAs. Gives you the opportunity to see total allocations as well as total estimated staffing costs for this particular campus. And then, as we mentioned, there is a weighted formula at the elementary school for counselors and assistant principals. And so we have an example here with Campus A and Campus B. And you can see the weighted formula that we use to determine the supports for the counselors and assistant principals there. As you're looking at this, you might notice that the overall student enrollment for Campus A is lower than Campus B. However, because of the higher population of students receiving special education services, the counselor and the assistant principal allocation is increased. And if you would click one more time, you can see that formula there in action at the bottom right. So in looking at that weighted formula, you can see step one, we have a total of 550 students, and we're going to subtract the number of special education students from that, which gives us a total of 300 students, or X. We take the number of special ed students, that 250, and we multiply it by 1.5, the weighted formula, which gives us the 375. When we add X plus Y, we add the 300 plus the weighted 375, and then divide that by the 450, we get 1.5, and we do round up at that point.
So we actually wanted to give you an opportunity to look at one of our, at campus. Can you go to the next slide, please? Thank you. So these are our, as we said before, prior to 2021, all of our allocations were based on, strictly based on enrollment. And as we moved into 22, 23, 24, that's when we brought in the different weights for our campuses. And so where, to the slide before is showing, we'll actually do a side-by-side, but we want you to walk through or give you an opportunity to think about and actually staff one of our campuses. So by using our formulas. We'd like to pair you up into groups of 2 if you could find a shoulder partner. And if you see our formula at the top, so the first formula is for teachers. And so we're looking at the minimum baseline is, minimum of 20, class ratios of 1 to 29 for teaching, 6 of 8. And then the weights for a particular campus or based on student populations is at the bottom of that graph. And so we're going to ask one or two of you to get together and do the staffing ratios for teachers. So you're going to actually build the allocations out for an imaginary campus, if you wouldn't mind entertaining and engaging. And then for our assistant principals, so we'd like for a couple of you to work together, or if you're one of those math minds that like to work in isolation, you're welcome to do that as well. But we would like to assign assistant principals to a group and then counselors. So someone will do the allocations and the staffing for a counselor, just to explore and engage in the inner workings of what this formula actually means and does for our campuses. So Campus A, here is our imaginary campus. Campus A has 1,578 students enrolled. The EcoDis population is 164. The emergent bilingual population is 20. And our special education, our students who receive special education services at this campus, we have 29 of those. And so I think we'll have Trustee Quintana, and you're up, okay. Anyone else want to pass, or? Are you, okay, are you guys, will we move forward with the engagement, or would you like for us to just continue to move through the work?
Do we have a campus that looks like this?
This is one of our campuses,
Okay.
yes.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Actually, I would much rather not do the exercise and move through the work, but I also, this is the question that I asked last week. I see all of this, what I think our community wants to know, because the people that are watching, the people that are in this room, the formulas, this is not what is there an advanced math in this school? Is there a librarian in this school?
There is.
Is there foreign language in this school?
Yes.
Because we have schools where there is not a foreign language. We have a middle school where there's no foreign language. In that same middle school, kids are made to take AVID. That's what I want to know is happening in each school, and I can't seem to get that question answered. I was told last week that every school gets the same like FTEs or similar FTEs, and then they decide what they're going to do with it. Then that means there's places where you have double-blocked English and nothing else, and there's places where you have Harry Potter math and Star Wars science. So that's a problem for me. So how do we get to where no matter what elementary school you go to, you know you have X? I know that pretty much every elementary has art, PE, and music, but what some people don't know is that maybe that art teacher is split between two campuses or whatever. So how do we get to those numbers?
I think it's a very important question. I think it's distinct from this, though. I think this is like helping us understand the current method for assigning staff to campus. And I think you're moving to the next step, which is vitally important, but it's part of our academic baseline that we don't have, which is how do we ensure that every student's getting certain minimum expectations.
So then
I
my question
understand the purpose
is,
for this as far as being.
then how do we know what to cut? Like weights, and how does I guess I'm just not going to get an answer to that
I
question.
think it's a two-stage thing. I think question number one is how are the schools currently staffed? And let's understand that, because this is one mechanism that may be used to generate savings by adjusting the ratios and formulas. And then the second question is, what's the impact of having a staffing model like this because of the imbalance it creates? And then what's the consequence of cutting this? Because this might mean adjusting this is going to exacerbate the problem you're describing.
And then I
do
think-
see the value. I don't want to do the exercise, but I do see the value of understating the ratios by themselves.
Yeah, and I appreciate the idea of the exercise, but I also know our time is precious, and I'd rather hear it from you so we can have more conversation. I appreciate that. I'm hearing that from all my colleagues, and thank you. And I do think that's part of our academic vision question, right? Is even if we have weighted FTEs and more staff in some places but fewer options, what is going on? And we've been asking, I know, that question for a long time. And it does make it hard to make budget choices I mean, I think these are interwoven. And I think it is all part of this conversation. So thank you.
Yeah, no, we are okay to move past the formulas. I think our engagement tonight was to really just help make sure we understand like the impact that the weights have, and to explore the different options. So as you're having discussions about which options, and if we are looking to cut, then what kind of impact would that have on our campuses? So, can you keep moving? So we did have two campuses, if we could just walk through quickly. We did have two campuses to explore. Would you go to the next slide, please? And just looking at them side by side, had we gone through the exercises, you could see what our weighted system, for example, on campus A and campus B, if we were to use the weighted system that we currently have, campus A would have 75 teachers, campus B would have 85 teachers. If these were unweighted allocations, such as that which we had prior to 2021, campus A would have 72 allocations for teachers, and campus B would have 72.5 or 73, we round up.
And are these both actual campuses? You said the first one was?
Yes, ma'am,
Okay.
these are both
Thank you.
actual campuses, both high schools.
Yes, they're both high schools. And I would say something I kind of would like to address, like if we're looking at campus A, campus B, so like I'm sure I know which high schools they are. I know they're high schools automatically. And look, like, I think we just take it for granted that it's okay to have high schools that have demographics like this.
Sure.
To isolate students who are in poverty, and have a campus, like, but that's not how our city looks. And I think no matter what, with our limited resources, we're never gonna get to equity that way with having, because the rest outside of schools, it is so unequal. That with limited funding, it's something the schools cannot fix when you have. So I think part of when we're looking at doing our budgets is like, how can we make schools, all of our schools attractive to everybody? Because no parts of our community even look like this in a high school, like, because our high school boundaries are huge. And so people are choosing to leave because they don't think their kid's gonna get what they need at that high school. So we can like do formulas or whatever we want, but we have to be like really, really strategic and smart in communicating with families and like making all these schools that everyone wants to go to.
For sure. Thank you. I believe that, yes, so in which direction would we like to go? Do we want to, I appreciate you, Trustee Whitley Chu. In which direction would we like to go? Do we want to open for discussion or continue to move through the formulas?
I think it's helpful to see the presentation. It's helpful to know. It was really helpful at the beginning on the first slide when you said we need an answer about the direction we want to go on the fund balance. You know, knowing the answers that you want, the questions you need answers to tonight to continue moving forward, I think is extremely helpful to us, and that will help us make sure we answer what you want. And then I think as trustees, we need the option to discuss and deliberate, do we stand by these formulas? I know we've talked a lot about equitable funding rather than equal funding. That's why we move toward weights. But I think the question remains, we can have 98 teachers at one campus and fewer than 80 at the other, and yet still have fewer options for our students. The weight has not brought a similar weight to the programs we're offering students. And why is that? And so I think those are also important questions to ask as we talk about the budget. Because it's how many people we have and what we do with those people. And part of that's a budget question, and part of that is a deeper question about our academic vision. But knowing what you want answered, let's get through the presentation. Let us know what questions we absolutely need to answer. And then we can talk about all of this as we move forward.
Okay, great. So we'll continue to move through and just looking at weighted versus unweighted for our campus A and B. You know, weighted, our campus A and B would have 4 and 5 assistant principals and 5 counselors on each campus. If we were in an unweighted situation, we would be looking at 4 assistant principals on each campus and 5 and 4 on the other. So we'll continue to move.
So again, then building out the entire campus costs from principal through teachers as well as our classified staff. We did also include the special ed teachers as well as TAs in this one, estimated salaries including benefits. So we're looking at 100.5 allocations overall, staffing allocations, with an estimated staffing cost for that particular campus. And then the following slide, Campus B, again outlines similar information, larger staff overall, 135, including the special ed teachers and TAs, and an estimated staffing cost for that particular campus.
I think it's also important to note that the allocations and the funding, these are strictly for staffing, right? So this is not including the HVAC, the air conditioning, the operations of the campus. So just making sure that we make that note. Move on. And it's also important to know that we have various programs across the districts that that automatically warrant an additional FTEs. So for example, for Keeling and the Lively Middle School Magnets, there's 3 additional FTEs that go towards those particular campuses for their signature course teachers, and additional leadership positions such as the magnet director at each campus. And then LASA has an additional 3 allocations for the magnet there, or the special programs there. And then our special programs for the following on the far right, special programs clerk, excuse me, are allotted for the campuses on the right. We also have, I'm sorry, go ahead. Yes.
Sorry, just really quickly to understand the special program clerk. I guess, and the 3 above formula, what does that mean? 3 on top of?
Correct. So if
come
we
out of the
went through
formula?
the entire, the formulas that we just explored, and we had the FTEs allocated for these particular campuses, there are 3 additional FTEs that are allocated to those campuses for their specific programming.
And where do those dollars come from?
Our 199 budget.
Okay. And is that the same for the special program clerk?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Okay, thank you.
I have a what's a signature course?
You want to answer?
Just the magnet, as part of the magnet program for Keeling and Lively, specific to those programs.
Yeah, I'm so sorry. Yes, that's what I'm asking. What is the course? Is it like how to succeed 101, or is it just like, hey, make up something? and
It's
you
at the
can have it?
discretion of the principal and the
That's what I
campus.
thought. Thank you.
Great. So our primary purpose, again, was to share information with you as you get closer to make decisions, right? And to understand how our campuses are staffed. I understand there's also deep questions about the programming and what is the baseline expectation for each campus. And I know those conversations are continuing and those answers to those questions are coming. In talent strategy, our primary purpose is to staff the campuses. And so we wanted to, if we're looking at making adjustments from campus to campus, we just wanted you to make sure that you had the information you needed to make that decision informed as we talk about what's happening right in the workspace of our children. And so again, I want to just offer the considerations that ratios, weights, and scheduling are opportunities or spaces to explore. And our recommendation is to pause on the weights as they do align to our values. They also align, we want them to move forward alongside our academic vision, but considering ratios and scheduling. However, those are, that is our presentation, but we do know, we want to open the floor for conversation if needed.
So are there specific questions about this that you'd like to have answered? Do you want to know if we would like for you to bring a proposal to us about changing ratios, for example, about, what we're hearing about schedules out in the community? What information would be helpful for us to discuss at this point, in addition to the topics trustees want to bring? What information do you need from us?
Yes, thank you very much, President Boswell. We've talked about what we need from a finance perspective. We have the expectation. What is the expectation for our fund balance? And the information that was provided from a staffing perspective it was for informational purposes only. There wasn't a requirement or any additional information. We wanted to make sure that not only our board members, but as well as our community understand how we currently staff, and that if we do come back later to adjust or to change those, at least there'll be a starting place or a foundation of where to start from. Everyone will be clear how we currently staff, and then if we decide that that's a proposal that we would want to make into changing ratios or formulas, then everyone will be aligned with where we are and where we're going. So right now, there is no additional information needed from a staffing perspective. It was all informational purposes, but I would like us to have some discussion about the expectation for the fund balance.
Okay.
So that we can get laser focused on what the deficit is and how we need to proceed.
Okay. And so if we go back to the slide with the general fund,
Slide number 2.
Thank you. And I think if we're looking at it too, we have the $181 million deficit shown as the starting point for each scenario. But
Yes.
what I see to get to that 15% fund balance, the deficit we would actually need to close would be 177. The deficit we would actually need to close to get to that 16% would be 185.
Yes.
And the deficit we would need to close to hit that 17% would be 193.
Yes.
Okay. And so that's the question, is how do
Because
we
I
want
know-
to balance the fund balance and the depth of the cuts?
There's been conversation, do we want to say, we want to just have a balanced budget, stick with the 15%? Do we want to contribute some money back into the fund balance? And if we do that, do we want to do that at 16% or 17%? And so this really helps us start, we're always going to have the floor of the $181 million, but this helps us decide how much further or how deeper reductions we'll need to make over these next coming weeks.
Okay, and I know Trustee Singh is out of town and not with us tonight. And I know you've heard her input, so Trustee Kaufman?
Right, well, now's our chance to be a little more, less conservative. I would like to echo the concerns that Trustee Singh has shared many times about the importance of having conservative estimates in terms of the enrollment and in terms of ADA and all the other, and property values. I don't want to exaggerate like our resources if they're not going to be there. But I'm more concerned, and I also think the fund balance is extremely important to pay attention to and to make sure that we're not creating a situation where we're putting the district or payroll at risk or having to take out emergency loans at a cost to the district. So I agree with all that. But I'm equally concerned about the other side, which is preemptively making cuts that are going to hurt and then finding out later on that we didn't need to. And so I really want to put that, if we cut librarians, for example, which I don't think we would possibly do, but we could, if we were to cut librarians, that's irreversible for that year. And it's going to create a situation that can't be resolved over multiple years to come. So I don't want us to cut things and then end up regretting cutting them because now we can't just put them back. So I would like to be very, I would like to find a good balance between being very cautious with our money, but applying equal caution to the cuts that are irreversible. So I would lean towards, something a little riskier in terms of the fund balance than being like, I would rather miss the fund balance mark by a little bit than guarantee that we hit it by making excessive cuts. If that makes sense. So that would mean, in this, I would want to lean towards the 15% as the target. When it comes to the 3% and the 5% and all that, I would like to follow the guidance of the demographers and the tax people that you've talked to, and follow that guidance and try to like go in at their level and not be more conservative than what they're estimating. And if that results in harder cuts next year, I'm okay with that, because I'd rather have slightly harder cuts next year than unnecessary cuts this year.
And I echo exactly what Trustee Kaufman is saying. I think that 15% is responsible in both ways. I think it is the most responsible thing to do, where it gets us to a balanced budget or extremely close, which hasn't happened in a while due to chaos from our state. So I think that is an extremely responsible number for taking care of our students and staff the best that we can. And I think also using the most accurate number from our experts from TCAD and using that 3%. So I think that those are the most responsible things to do right now. Or sorry, 3% in reduction of
Property values.
Yes, negative
Yes.
3%.
Okay.
Yes, I understood what you meant, yes.
Trustee Hunter?
What she said.
So I had, I'm kind of jumping back, but I had a question in regards to the staffing allocations, because I, take it that, adjusting the weights is the consideration around cost savings. One of the things that I've noticed a lot in the slides that are brought up is around the vacancy savings and unfilled positions. Is that reflected in the numbers that we're looking at in these staffing ratios? Like, is this considering unfilled positions, or is this, how many of these are, missing staff that aren't there, or is it not reflected in this?
Let's go back. So for the vacancy collapse positions that we propose is only for departments.
Okay, so none of that's on campus?
None of that is on campuses.
Okay.
It's just departments.
Okay, thank you.
Yes.
Trustee Foster?
So I keep thinking, what you've all raised in the past about our cash flow solvency versus our student outcomes. Mm-hmm. And then, of course, versus the things that are hard to unring, the bells that are hard to unring. So it's like a triangle of challenges. And I've said over and over again that I worry dramatically about the numbers being worse. I also, between the lines, am more than sympathetic to there are some cuts like you can't get back. So even if I have a pretty strong feeling that it's going to be worse than what we're projecting, even if I have that feeling, there can be a level at which, if we budget according to that, well, nothing's on the plate and we don't eat and student outcomes crash, or we can't unring bells. And so it makes me extremely uncomfortable, and I'm already thinking about the contingencies in next year. But I think the cuts we have to make are so hard, and it's going to be so hard to preserve student outcomes. And I'm going to ask really powerfully, pointedly, strongly that our equity lens stays solidly in place, which is reflected in weightings, but it's also reflected in other ways as well. Mm-hmm. So if I'm going to push for equity, which means somehow, whether it's Title I or this or that, certain things have to remain on certain campuses. And getting those things that people want and people need on the campuses will require that we cut a little, that we in this case say we'll just go down to the 15% and stay with that. So in other words, the long and the short of this, I'm super uncomfortable with this. Mm-hmm. I think fiscally, in a sense, it's imprudent, but I think student outcomes wise, it's necessary, and we have to do what we have to do. So I don't want to see us make any more cuts, as Trustee Kaufman said, than we absolutely have to make, because we're already cutting into the bone. So I'm okay with the 15% as well.
Trustee Quintana?
I don't understand. I'm just going to start there. It was my understanding that we were gonna kind of do this budget work in tandem with thinking about what our baseline academics would look like at each school. Am I understanding that? Okay. I don't, so when y'all talk about the weights, how does that affect the baseline academics that we are providing at every school?
Do you want to? We'll let Dr. Maxwell's going to come and talk a little bit about the academic framework on our campuses.
Hi, good evening, everyone. We've said the word academic a lot tonight, so, and I keep getting looks now, so coming down. Sure. So it was, I didn't work on this presentation, but I did hear some conversation around it when it started. And it was my understanding that this tonight was really just supposed to start with staffing to get a better baseline and understanding of how we're staffing schools. And that next steps in the conversation would be to talk about, and everyone uses the term academic baseline, everyone uses it a little bit differently. There have been a few different definitions around it, but for what I'm gathering tonight, what we mean by it is we want to say at every elementary school, no matter what, we have these things, which is fairly easy to do at the elementary level. It gets a little harder to do at the middle school level and at the high school level, without further evaluation of programs that we have been, I think, building for years at the district, that would take more than just a few weeks to truly evaluate and say, yes, we want to continue this or do this as a district. We want this at every school, or no, this program isn't having the impact that we think that it is, or maybe we can't afford this program or these things anymore, and we'll have to look and say whether or not we can continue those. That work gets a little more complicated kind of as you go up and you get even more diverse in programs. And obviously things change and are different across communities in the schools. So I think that what we have laid out for the academic framework is a longer term plan. And I don't know that we would be able to answer all of those specific questions by the time we have to have a budget voted on in June. But what we had talked about in next steps would be to say, okay, knowing how we staff our campuses, then that gives us the reality of what we have and what we allocate to our campuses based on the programs that currently exist, and use that information to inform, not necessarily make decisions about programs. That gets a little, I know that gets sticky because when we're saying, in effect, oh, we don't want to cut this program, but we're going to need to cut all of the allocations and the FTEs that actually support this program, then what you're doing in effect is cutting that program because you just sort of cut all of the support that would even make it able to exist in the first place. So it's, I mean, it's a sort of a chicken or the egg thing, really, to try to figure out what to do first. But I think next step is really just to come with as much of that information as possible so that we can connect staffing to actual campuses, looking at programs at those campuses and seeing how they are staffed currently. There might be, I think, some adjustments, and that's what we're looking at right now as we look across the district, and we have line item after line item for all of our departments to really look at all of our programs and the staffing that goes with it to support, not just here, but on campuses as well. To really see, can we maintain this program with all of these positions, or could we maintain at the same quality, rescaling or reducing in certain ways and still be able to maintain that program, and trying to make those decisions as much as possible in the short amount of time that we have now. For sure, next steps going on into the summer and into the fall are something that really should have been taking place on an annual basis, or maybe a biannual or triannual basis, is really just evaluating our programs that we do have in the district. And there should be a system set up for that. That's what we're working towards long term, to really create that system so that we can say, let's prioritize these programs first. We're going to evaluate those. We're going to make some decisions on those. Let's move to the next. evaluate those, make some decisions on those. I know that doesn't help answer all of the questions that we have to have for budget right now, but that's the plan, to do what we can now and then do what we can in the future. Is that?
Well, and my understanding is we've been talking about academic baseline, which is just what's the bare minimum. We've been talking about academic vision, which is really what we believe about a whole lot of things, right? And deeper with our long-term that you've laid out, that you're working with our community. And I think one of the questions that I think this is highlighting, when I hear Trustee Hunter talk about a middle school that has no language, it is one of our middle schools that is receiving significant weight. How can we have more teachers and fewer opportunities? And we know at that that there's a campus that is making everyone take AVID, whether they want to or not, and yet not offering a foreign language. So I think I think it would be helpful to talk maybe not about the full vision, but maybe just that baseline.
Right.
What's the minimum we need to offer by law?
Yeah.
And kind of what are our basics. So I'd love to hear from Trustee Quintana and then Trustee Hunter.
So just two things really quickly. I think that for me, it's difficult to take a vote on this when I don't have all of the information, if I don't know if we can afford all of the programs that we have. And I know that that's, a lot of work for y'all, but, maybe this is, like you said, an opportunity for us to kind of change the way that we do things, and maybe next budget season that comes along, we can, have a more, detailed plan in place, because that's just hard. It's just hard to know if we can afford the things that we're spending money on. That makes it hard to take a vote. And I think that the thing, when I hear this conversation and I hear that, there's a middle school that doesn't have a language teacher, there were schools in my district that didn't have, a science teacher. It seems to me that we can't afford all of the programs and the special things that we do, if that means there are some schools and kids who aren't meeting that baseline, right? And that is just another, conversation. But where I'm sitting from right here, I know it's hard for everyone, but as a trustee, it feels like it's really hard to take a vote on this budget without all that information.
I think that would probably go along the lines of what we're doing with our process right now, from building things from a zero-based budget and then starting with what actually we have to do that is either federally or state or locally policy required. And starting there with, and then adding on, so what are we doing that we believe is, really moving schools forward, or like really helping us meet accountability first and then moving schools forward and kind of building it from there, which would be the same way that we look at, in the short amount of time that we have, that we could look at programs. It's probably safe to say we can't afford all of the things that we're doing now because we are so over budget, and passing deficit budget. So we are spending more than we're making, so to speak. So I think it's fair to say yes. I mean that we can't afford everything that we're doing right now, just from a number sense. Now, what those things are is obviously the hardest thing to vote, because there's so much that we do that is incredibly valuable, that is not required, right? Middle school, however, I mean, I can also say we would start, if you're thinking about programs, would be graduation requirements and then specific pathways for graduation requirements, right? You would start there. Languages would be one of those. And so I don't know if the campus is able to not fill the FTE, if that's the reason. But every campus should be allocated some sort of FTE for a language, because it's part of graduation requirement.
And
So-
I think to add to Dr. Maxwell and back to Trustee Quintana's question is going back to Katrina's slide from earlier, when she just said, you know, our 88% of our budget goes towards or is designated to staffing. And so when we show you the staffing formulas, really it's to understand that our revenue comes from, or a large portion of our revenue comes from enrollment, but it's not just enrollment, it's ADA, right? And so we're talking about, we had a sample school with 1,578 students. And to maximize the revenue from enrollment, every student would have to be in school every day to generate the amount of funding that's needed. But our formulas themselves are structured in a way that the formula supersedes or exceeds the revenue brought in by enrollment. And so when we show you the formulas, that's the why, is to better understand that the way we do things by itself exceed the amount of dollars or funding that we receive from from enrollment or our ADA. And so that is, that's the question, right? Like that's what's on the table, the conversation that's happening. And we're talking about 88% of our budget. So we know we can't fix the problem or solve the problem with the 13 or 12% that's left. We have to address portions of the 88. And when we think about staffing, again, it's a broad term that encompasses several different roles. But we have to look at those percentages and then, and also lay those alongside our programs and our values and the things that we say we need and want for every kid to move forward in Austin ISD.
I would like to also add, can we go to slide 7 to what Denisha just said? I just want to, I think she made a very, very, very valuable point. And when slide 7 is pulled up, you will definitely see that slide 7. Thank you. Yeah, so like even if we look at the 5th 6 weeks, we're staffing our campuses inexclusive of the weights for 69,225 students. We're receiving funding for 61,863. And so immediately, our budget is already in a deficit because we're staffing for the students to be in class, to be here, for every student enrolled, but we're very clear that every student is not going to be in class every day. So what Denisha said is a very poignant point that we need to be clear about, is that it's the difference between the levels that we're staffing, plus the weights, plus all of the addition, and then the amount of ADA we're receiving. So thank you for that additional clarification.
Thank you. Trustee Hunter?
I'm gonna push back a little bit. The LRP. I specifically did not join the LRP because what is happening is exactly what I thought was gonna happen. All those hours, all that time, all those weekends, all those nights, all those meetings to do exactly what we're asking people to do right now. What's the baseline? What can every parent expect? That work has been done. So I want to thank those people who did that work, because that work has been done. I have been on this board since 2022. I've asked about early college high schools a whole lot of times. We have 7 early college high schools. Manor has 1. They still graduate more people than us. We have on-ramps. We have ACC. We have AP. And we get those scores. And they're sometimes abysmal. Kids dropping out of classes in the middle, kids not finishing, kids not passing, and not understanding the impact that that's gonna have later on. We have been asking. This is not new. I have a question that I'm gonna read that was canceled for whatever reason. I don't have an answer to it, but it was canceled. It says, I am requesting the following data and estimates to better understand the financial and operational implications of current programs and initiatives. Transportation costs. Total cost of student transportations for magnet programs, on-ramps, dual enrollment with the University of Texas, the Early College High School, and with Austin Community College for FY 23-24, FY 24-25. Please disaggregate these figures by middle school and high school where possible. Grade configuration analysis, a conservative estimate of potential annual savings if the district were to transform from 7 to 8 middle school model. Specials redesign. Total expenditure to date and projected costs associated with the specials redesign initiatives. An estimate of the number of teaching assistant positions, particularly PE specials TAs, that would be eliminated, reduced, or reclassified under this redesign. Facilities and property management, a conservative estimate of potential lease revenue from underutilized or available central office space. Current or projected costs for managing vacant or underutilized district properties, including maintenance, utilities, and security. 5, if the district keeps Maplewood and Briarwood open, what campuses would have to close in their place? 6, it has been brought to my attention that Maplewood is on a railway easement. What does this mean to sell development? I don't have answers to any of those. This is not new. And I'm telling you right now, I cannot vote on a budget if I do not know what we're gonna cut. And if that means we have to stay up late, then we have to stay up late. But this is not new, and it has been asked again and again and again and again. Full stop.
Thank you, Trustee Hunter. So kind of what I'm hearing from my colleagues that I hope will be helpful, because we have a lot of budget workshops scheduled. I told my family and my full-time job, I was like, I think you can expect me to be at a meeting every Thursday until the budget is voted on. So I think to help you guys out, what I'm hearing from trustees is like, they don't want to do like another thought exercise and kind of like, okay, we're getting your values and then we're going to like spit out the budget. We really want to go into some detail and give you like that information to make those kind of decisions. I see I do see some opportunity with these slides, because I think the staff needs really a clear direction from us. I would love to go through, go through slide number 2. I'm writing down feedback from trustees. So slide number 2, we talked about the fund balance. So I heard from Trustee Kaufman, Trustee Hunter, myself, and Trustee Foster that they were comfortable with the 15%.
And I will add my voice to that. I didn't have a chance to answer that, but I think we are cutting really fundamental things that are very close to our student experience, that are very close to our staff experience. We have our staff telling us what it will mean if we go to 7 of 8, the profound impact that will have on their work life, on what they can offer our students, on the feedback they can give our students, on the planning they can do, especially for people with multiple preps, that making it only for core teachers to have planning time lacks a recognition that sometimes our non-core teachers have more preps, that we don't have a clean division between core and non-core, that many of our core also teach electives, lots of things. I think we're cutting really, really deep and really, really close. I know we have a cycle of every 2 years hoping it might get better when the session comes, and hoping we might get more funding. But I think to get to an only $4 million deficit is a really heroic, painful work in a moment when the funding we're allowed to have from the state is not keeping up. And it is hard to approve something where I know we might be in a position where we have to borrow. And I don't think we have a whole lot of choice right now, because these are deep and deeply disruptive cuts. And 177 is a lot. I think 193, I'm not sure we survived that intact. We have had so much disruption. So add me to that list, please. Thank you.
And then, so if we're going through that, Trustee Durioste, do you want to weigh in today?
So I'm thinking how to phrase this, or how do I want to say this. I think the short answer is I would be okay with staying at 15%, but I do want to put, a footnote on that, is that, we're not going to cut ourselves out of the problem that we're facing. And so I want to be clear, especially, for the community that's going through this and, presumably listening tonight, is, thinking back to last year's budgeting and then to see where we are now. And I think, to kind of Trustee Hunter's sentiment, this doesn't seem particularly new either. And, that all the stuff that's in consideration largely is all stuff that was last year. And I said this at a meeting the other day, that it's going to be all the same stuff next year. Unless there's a significant change in the overall situation, there are going to be continually, strong cuts that are going to affect all the programming and all this stuff. I would like to see this, if we're staying at 15%, to me, that the idea there is that we're buying some time. And I would like to have some clarity on what we're going to do with the time that we're buying, because we have more to make up, right? When we decided to go down to 15, we had a 3-year plan, all this, but the ground is kind of moving underneath us as we're doing this work. And so I would, maybe borrowing a sentiment from Trustee Singh, is I would like us to start planning now as if we are going to have to do even more extreme cuts next year, and start talking about that now. To me, it seems easier to figure out what to do with extra money that we somehow end up getting after session than coming up with cuts that the community is just going to hear about shortly before it happens. I would rather have that discussion, what we're doing by staying at 15% is, minimizing what we're doing right now because we're planning to do it next year. Because I don't see any way that we're not going to end up doing it next year in, the waters that we're navigating, unless something, there's a sea change, and I think we would be able to see that coming. So we can change course if it seems like there's going to be a correction later. But I would rather us be planning now for what are we doing next year, because all the stuff like the academic baseline, all these other pieces, Trustee Quintana is saying she's having worries about voting on a budget when she doesn't have that clarity. I mean, if we're going to try and minimize the damage that we're doing now, I don't want to just pass that down to next year. And I don't think the community is going to trust us to not be doing that after the experiences they've had. So I would rather us just say, okay, if we're doing that 15% now, this is because we're planning what our contingency is next fall or next budget season, and start that now so that people are not surprised that that's coming down the line. Because I don't see how this changes any other way.
And Trustee De Urioste, to that point, I think we as a board have an opportunity to rethink our budget calendar for a new budget reality, and think about how early we start having these conversations and how we make our budget conversation a year-round situation, because a few months is not enough time to give this the thoughtful work. It does allow us to wrap in deeper conversations about what we're offering, where, why, how we're using the resources we do have to expand what's possible for our students. So I think there's a real conversation about we have to talk about the budget sooner and more often. So I appreciate that, Trustee Quintana.
And I think taking a vote so close to when the budget is due to TEA is not helpful either. Or maybe, if we started earlier, maybe taking a vote to so close would be fine, but it doesn't feel good.
And it's hard for our staff who have questions. Some people, 7 of 8 is a deal breaker. And yet they are expected to sign contracts and make decisions about what they're doing next year. It is the schedule. I understand some of it is dictated by when we know property values and we're still making some assumptions, but it's not a kind schedule to people who are making decisions about their lives, to our staff. So I hear that.
And Trustee Quintana, I think we all heard you loud and clear, and I agree with you that we need more detail before we're ready to approve this. And something that would help the staff to present us with more detail on what they're their proposed cuts are, would be if they know what trustees will approve as the fund balance, so they know the revenue they're working on. Do you feel comfortable today talking about where you feel comfortable on the fund balance percentage?
No.
Okay.
I think I'm hearing two different things, and you know, I think I'm hearing we don't want to cut too close to the bone, but then also we don't want to have to do more severe cuts next year. And to me, those are contradictory statements, and so I don't think I'm
You
ready
need some
to.
time. Thank you.
And Trustee Foster, I think you had a comment.
Yeah. So I don't know where this gets inserted. There's certain things I want to ask and I'm curious about, and I just don't know where they fall into the conversation, and I feel like I'm going to lose my opportunity. So I have some questions and just some thoughts, and I don't know where that will go. Is that okay? First, clarifying question. As I've said several times, and I will continue to say, equity versus equality as a sort of leading principle in this. And I mentioned student outcomes. And as I've been trying to clarify for myself sort of a theory of action around this, I think in terms of where I feel like the student outcomes are likely to be there, even with deeper cuts, and where with deeper cuts, the student outcome, it's just not going to happen. The students absolutely need the certain supports that are provided. And so I'm ever looking for indications in our slide decks that that is coming through. And I actually don't see it in our slide decks, but then when I ask about it of the senior leadership, they're actually often able to come up really quickly with the ways that they are thinking about this and how it will be okay. And they're not. I'm not being gaslit. Like there's receipts there. So I would like that to be kind of more upfront in the conversation, if that's possible. It will help me to consistently not get lost in the weeds and to consistently be able to pursue my personal North Star as a trustee. As a clarifying question, when we talk about staffing, where do instructional coaches and content interventionists fit into the model? Because I don't see those listed, and there's so many campuses that I visit where I see it in action and where I hear people speaking to how this particular innovation of the last few years where we've leaned in has been really powerful. I want to see it continue. But I also understand that you could pull academic coaches to the central level and do away with the campus-based, like, I don't know where we are on that stuff is what I'm saying. So tell me about that real quick. The instructional coaches, content interventionists, where they fit into the budget.
Got it. Yep.
Is the
Let me look
question
this
how they're
way.
funded, or just how we place them on campuses?
Are they going to be there? Like, what's the plan?
Well, instructional coaches are funded, and I believe they're all out of title, if that's correct.
They're all out of title, and content interventionists are all out of our local funding. Some of our TAP campuses did receive additional funding just to support their campuses, $385K, and many of them are adding to the content interventionists that were designed for their campuses or that were allotted to their campuses. And adding additional content interventionists or additional teachers, or the principals are making that decision based on the academic needs of their students. Dr. Maxwell, do you want to add any more?
I want
to
to
that?
add something real quick. For the TAP campuses, each TAP campus, excluding of the $385,000, they're getting an IC, they're getting a CI, they're getting a PSS, as well as the additional funding, as well as stipends. So I wanted to clarify that.
Thank you.
Yeah, they're in a sense really part of the structure of thinking about how we are staffing campuses differently that have the highest need. We do even look at data in order to annually to look at those placements of how our students are doing on those campuses, the higher number of students that could possibly qualify for interventions. We place the content interventionists at those campuses the most. Of course, they're working directly with kids, and one of the things that we are trying to protect most is the people that are working directly with students. As far as content interventionists go, instructional coaches are just part of that instructional leadership team that when you're trying to turn a school around are very, very critical.
And I have a question. Does our revenue line include our federal revenue on slide 2? That is not just state revenue, that's
Yes,
all
that's all
sources.
revenue.
That's all sources of revenue. Thank you.
So that's really helpful to hear, the use of local funds, the use of Title I funds, and that's a kind of clarifying thing. And it's weird because I'm coming to ever more deeply appreciate how tough finance is, because you want to present us with this one budget, but it's got this aspect, that aspect, and these things that aren't counted, and and even acknowledging that, I need to hear what I just heard. And actually, it's been shared with me, but you all sharing that is very, very useful. Pushing further, when we have these conversations, there was a principle that was lifted up, I think from maybe our superintendents, echoed by Trustee Singh, or maybe the other way around, but basically there was agreement and head nods in the room when the conversation was about not just cutting, but transforming and looking for the opportunities to do things differently. And right now, necessarily, we're talking about the precursors to cutting, because there's going to be huge cuts, and we need to talk about the cutting. I'm super interested in continually the transformational work. So for instance, if we go to, I guess it was last year's budget, and you said transportation hubs, and we rethought, the administration rethought transportation, and presumably is still serving our kids, but now serving them with a slightly different model, where a bus leaves the barn, they go to the hub, they go to the site, boom. They're not accumulating miles and et cetera, et cetera. To me, that was like a transformative piece. I'm excited to hear about transformation. And one of the things about transformation is it might even create opportunities for equity. So a couple years ago, I was on a horse and got nowhere, and it occurs to me that the issue is still there. I think of a high school campus. We're talking about CTE. We're talking about what programming is where, and here I've got a campus where I talk to a constituent, and they don't go to that campus. They go to another school, but they really like what's on this campus, and so they get a bus to go from the school they transferred out of to go get a bus. They're going over there, however they're getting there, but then they get a bus back to the home school to take advantage of the programming at that home school. So what do we call that? Student sharing? So
For CTEs.
that's right. So here we are, and I'm thinking, how much money does that cost? Don't know the answer, but I bet it's more than I bet it costs some money. I think of these instances where we've been okay with acquiescing to our constituents' heartfelt and real desires, but we're doing something that people want, and they could go to this home school. In fact, they seem to actually low-key like this home school because they keep coming back every week to do the programming. So why are we doing that? I don't know how many examples there are of that. I think of this notion of choice. We've said we like magnets, and so we're doing magnets. We do CTE. What's Clifton? What does it look like to scale Clifton? And do Clifton a little bit differently. And say, this is going to be the hub for all of this, and this. Now, I haven't run any numbers. I have no idea. This is above my pay scale unless I were to spend hours and hours and hours thinking about it and studying it and talking to people smarter than me. But where are the opportunities for transformational work that will simultaneously support student outcomes, produce more equitable approaches, and actually save us money? So I'd be really interested and excited to get granular like that. And what's really cool is when I talk to y'all senior administrators, y'all can give me examples of where we're doing it. And it's like, wow, can we do more of that? And then can we also share that with the public because they need to hear it? Last thing I'll just quickly say to this is that I would love to get, this is just an offline thing, I would love to get, and I'm trying to actually develop my own list of all the examples of all the transformative work you're doing, and some of it is micro-transformative work. I don't know how to better to say this, but where you've looked at a department and you said, how can that department be rethought to affect savings and do a better job? I need those examples and those stories because pretty much I'm at an everyday now, and I bet I'm not the only trustee, where I get, did you think of this? Did they think of that? Why are they doing this? Why are they doing that? And 8 times out of 10, y'all are doing it. And the community doesn't know. And I don't know how to get that word out. So I'll stop with that, but the key that I'm saying is I want transformative work, and I want that transformative work brought into our presentations for us to debate and discuss.
Thank you for that. I appreciate that. Trustee Willie-Chu, I think we've gotten what we need from slide 2. Do you want to walk us through slide 3? Because I think there are a lot of assumptions baked into slide 3 that are conversations we've been having about enrollment, ADA, property value change. I know you spoke to the property value change question. Do you want to walk us through these assumptions and make sure we all get feedback?
Yes.
Thank you.
'Cause I think I think we're all hearing, like, I'm hearing from other trustees, I agree, we want to get more into like the granularity and more in how this is going to affect students. And then when Ms. Montgomery has this information from us, then like her department can focus on those other things. So I want to first talk about property value change. And then, so I have like an old life, I worked in property tax. And so when they're getting this 3%, negative 3% value change from the chief appraiser, this isn't just a guess because we are in April. So they now have sales data, market data and sales from January, February, March, April now. So this isn't just a guess, this is like what is happening, and the chief appraiser like sets the values. So that is a very, very reliable number. I think there was like a lot of like pressure to be like very, very conservative, but I would like to pressure us, and then can we go to slide number 4, to be, or maybe slide number 3? I think 4 is good? Yeah, okay. It shows the percentages. I would like to pressure us to be extremely accurate, because, and look at 3%. So feedback-wise from trustees, Trustee Kaufman echoed that accurate, wanting to go with that expert number of a 3% reduction in property value. Trustee Hunter also gave that feedback. I did. And
I have a question, Ms. Montgomery. Between this time last year and when the values were certified, do you know what the prediction was this time last year and how off they were by the time they were certified?
It was 2%.
2% off.
So we had.
And the certification comes after the protest in July.
The final certification comes in July. The numbers we had around this time last year was a negative 2%, and we ended up landing at a negative 4%.
At a negative 4. And what has the appraiser, I know you're in close conversation with the appraiser. What is the appraiser telling you this year?
She's saying originally.
What does she believe is different?
Yes, so originally she told us between -3 and -5. We received our numbers in March, I believe the date is, and so now she's landing at a closer of a -3%. Some of the change that we're dealing with is there are lots of protests, and hate to put it out publicly, but there are lots of protests and a lot of people are winning. So that decreases the amount, but then there's also a reduction in, my brain just left me, a reduction in real estate, like real estate buildings. So that because more people are working from home, and so there's less real estate rental, commercial rental. Thank you very much.
And how confident do you feel in that 3% prediction right now? And can you help just walk me through your thinking about why you're hearing 3 from the appraiser? You chose to come down from 5 to 4, but why you didn't come down from 5 to 3? That will help me figure out.
Yes, I agree with Trustee Woodley Chu. Our chief appraiser has really been trying to land and be very conservative. But also, as the CFO, I am very clear of the last 2 to 3 years, we have been off. So the percentage has been 2 to 3% off. And so if we go with the 3%, that is what she's telling us, and the numbers end up being another 2% off, that means that our property values, the revenue that we'll receive will be a -2% off. And that's the spot that we've been in for years, is because then we're trying to recoup that revenue in the current fiscal year. So that's why I landed at approximately the -4%, somewhere in the middle, so that we didn't have to be as aggressive and stay at 5, but not be at the 3% and then possibly have to make adjustments or changes in the current fiscal year of 26-27.
So I will say, given all of that, for me, my heart wants to be at 3. My head is like, and I do feel a little more comfortable because you have adjusted the enrollment prediction and adjusted the ADA to go with it. So I would say I'm not all the way there, but I'm probably halfway there.
Maybe, are you maybe at a 3.5?
You can call me a 3.5.
Sure.
You can give it a number. Okay, Trustee Hunter, I saw you responding. Okay. Oh, you're good. Okay. Who else? Anyone else want to give it a number or share where you are? On the property value
Asking on the property.
assumption?
Yeah, I would go assuming we're gonna get as little money as whatever the lowest estimate is gonna be.
So you want to stay at 4?
I would say like a question I have about the 4 for you. Is that based on like strong trustee feedback you got in the last meeting? Or like that's based on like, you get what I'm saying?
I do,
Yeah.
but I want you to say it.
Or is that based on like, is that based on you're like, I'm a 4? Like,
Good question. So what Trustee Daniels said is true. Like, we have to be really, really, really careful at balancing the cutting too deep, but then also getting ourselves, because we're going to use the smaller numbers so we can make less reductions. Now the deficit is not as large as it could be, and then putting ourselves in a situation for next year. So if we've landed on the -4%, I understand everyone's concern about going at a -5, but I would, if you ask Katrina Montgomery, I would like to land nearer to the -0.5, the -5%, because even though it is going to make us have to make stronger reductions this year, we're not in a place in the current fiscal year where we have to make reductions or changes. And so that is extremely hard for any system, but it is extremely, extremely challenging for a system this big when 88% of our budget is staff.
And I have a question. Are you now staffing for the 66,768 number? Is that the plan?
We're staffing for The 69,000, because we're staffing based on what the enrollment projections are. Because
But what is the adjusted enrollment then, if that's not what the enrollment projection is?
the adjusted enrollment is the 4% decline. So we're looking at the 4% difference, and what we want to do is, let's go back. So for enrollment, we're staffing our campuses on the enrollment number because we don't want our campuses to be impacted by us staffing for 66 and then enrollment comes in at 69,000.
So we're adjusting our enrollment number, but not in a way that impacts our budget,
We're
except with our ADA.
Except with the ADA.
But we're still staffing, okay.
We're staffing our campuses on the 69,000 projected enrollment.
And if we end up with 66, 768, or 65, do we do a RIF? Do we have a horrible leveling process? What happens?
At this moment, I would say we would have to level. And then what that leveling looks like, we'd have to discuss. But if the enrollment decreases by, if we're saying our enrollment number is 69,000, that's what we're staffing on, and we come in at 4% less like we did this year, we would need to level. Because then at that point, we would be overstaffed. Because you'd be staffing for 69,000, but you would actually have 66,000 in this example.
Okay, so adjusted enrollment isn't, and that, I was wondering why that wasn't really changing budget and our deficit, and now I understand.
Yeah, so, but we are taking it in consideration in the ADA though,
Okay.
in the funding.
Yeah, well, and that's what I was asking at our last meeting, that I asked, we could take it offline. Were we making the adjustment in our enrollment number or just in our ADA? And I see that. So I will continue to express my concern that I think we are making overly optimistic predictions by thinking our enrollment is going to go up. I think that is a mistake. Thank you.
Thank you.
I would like to go to the slide that has our central office.
And can we
divisions.
go and, does anyone else have anything to say
Yeah.
about the
Oh,
property
yeah,
value
yeah.
change or the enrollment number?
Because I have two blanks. Oh, on the, I feel like enrollment, I can't even guess. I can't even be helpful, so I'm like, I'm gonna go with what you said.
So
Okay.
I think I would just throw in is, I mean, there's other sources of funding that are potentially at risk or that are not 100% dependable. Like, I mean, there's other ways that we might still come up short from whatever our projected budget is. And so, certainly, we're soliciting community feedback, people will weigh in on this. But my thought on this is to plan, for lack of a better word, plan low, so that we're not overselling the public on what they're going to receive, and then we end up having to cut more again. And I think with the response that we've gotten for the community, I mean, the community can give us feedback on it, but we're going to budget for more than we can afford, and then end up losing some source of funding and have to cut more. The impact on that, like I'm hearing so much people, bring up concerns about stability or that things keep moving on them mid-year, all these changes. So my thought on it is budget on something that is the least likely to change for us, even though we can't guarantee even with the conservative budget. I'm just throwing it out there, I guess, for the community that wants to give us feedback on this is, should we be budgeting more conservatively or not? I think that's something for the community to weigh in, as that's going to directly affect them if we budget high and then come in with lower enrollment or some, the entitlements get affected, whatever it's going to be, then we have to do stuff mid-year next year. And I mean, obviously people are going to feel that.
Thank you for that. I have one more follow-up about the enrollment number. Have we already staffed for something and already given people contracts to sign for things closer to that 69,000 number?
Yes, we have already staffed and we've sent out contracts. They are not due to come back to us until June 1st.
But are
So
we
we've
pretty fully hired up for the larger number?
Not fully. We've been in the hiring freeze since January 5th. And so we do have several vacancies that we've not filled.
But we don't have vacancies that would account for 3,000 kids that we haven't filled.
Just for staff, just for campus.
If we adjusted our budget to assume a lower enrollment, we would have to get rid of jobs for people we've already promised jobs to.
And that it's hard to, I can't say yes and no. We're sitting on right now, I think we have close to 400 vacancies. And so with those vacancies, we could collapse, right? And that's a broad answer.
Okay.
We have to start, it all depends on,
Sure.
is that a math teacher? Is that Algebra 1, or is it a ag mechanics CTE teacher, right? And so we do have a pocket of vacancies that we're not filling and we're holding, and we have sent out our allocations to campuses based on the 69,000.
Okay, so reducing our deficit by reducing our expected enrollment in kind of at that top of the line would be very disruptive. Okay,
Yes.
thank you. All right,
I think, are we?
I think
probably
we're
gonna wrap
solid
up
on that
at
one. I think
eight?
we've heard what we're gonna hear on that one.
So I'd love to move to slide 9. Yes. So something that's really glaring to me on here are 2 positions that no one works in those positions right now. So deputies, the 2 deputy superintendent positions and their staff. So that's about a $1.1 million budget item. So speaking for myself and what I feel like what I hear from our community is like there is not a big appetite for more high-level positions here. Those are ones I am not comfortable seeing in the budget, in the 2026, 2027 budget. I personally do not want to see those 2 deputy soup offices.
So, Trustee Woodley-Chu, the one thing I want to say is, I want to say last week or the week before, our superintendent has committed to not filling the deputy superintendent of business ops. I currently think the deputy superintendent of TLL, teaching, learning, and leading, is still in the
I have
process.
absolutely no interest in that position either. So thank you.
Anyone else?
I wrote some things down on that slide. Because it kind of gives us the strategy, and it says athletics, and you said some of these are directly with students, some of these are on campuses. Who is that?
And so some are the coordinators, right? The athletic coordinators that are at the central athletic office. I believe there are only 5, and then the executive athletic director. Most of those are groundskeepers and other workers who help manage and support our fields, like House Park and some of our Burger Stadium, and then custodial staff. So at one point, that all lived in operations, and over the last year, we've shifted that over to athletics so that they could have, just more control as games were coming and have their own staff.
Okay, remember the email I sent that said, show your work? This is what I meant. Tomorrow people are gonna wake up and they're gonna see, they're like, damn coaches, they already make $100,000. Now they got 24 of them just doing. You just explained to me what Kevin said earlier. Those are people we have to have, right? They're maintaining things, but that just says athletics. So my mind is allowed to just think whatever I wanna think because you haven't driven me in the right direction.
100%, and because I know, because of the budget codes, I know how it flows up to the TEA budget, but I also know that operation staff, that is bus drivers, correct? Every single bus driver would be operation, is that correct?
Oh, there she is, like she's hiring.
Yeah, one of those 300, every single custodian, every single food service worker in our cafeterias, And who else? Oh, every mechanic. Right.
Exactly. And people will see that number and say, why did 300 people to do what?
So I would say, like, if
your
y'all pull
kids.
that, and also, I know special education, I know that every single speech language pathologist who, they work on campus, they serve students, they are centrally allocated for budget efficiencies. Physical therapists, diagnosticians, educational diagnosticians, school psychologists. I know I miss occupational therapists. So, like those folks work with our kids. And I'm sorry, I know I missed awesome people. Adaptive PE. Thank you.
No, you're correct, and I would have to get with Ms. Montgomery on this specific number, but many of the operations staff who are our groundskeepers, who mow the grass, who are our custodians that are on campuses but are centrally orged, could be a part of that number, absolutely, for sure. In the operations division, there is no one that works in this building that is in that number.
Thank you. Anything else, Trustee Hunter?
No, I just wanted to say it so people could see it and hear it and know that, because I mean, if I get one more email,
Yeah.
which people are allowed to do because I work for them, but I'm like, we already solved that problem, or, but we're still not saying it, right? And if we don't, like, that, I really would like to see that athletics number and then say 3 House Park, 4 whatever, 5 whatever. Because remember last week when I said, when people see that number, they'll be like, I'll make more money than them. And then that helps people think, okay, well, that's not a solution. When we did consolidations, people really put their brains together. And I mean, they came up with some awesome plans. But they're just repeating things that have already been done or things that don't really apply because it's an asymmetry of information. And in this case, there doesn't need to be one. This is absolutely where we could be completely transparent. I guess unless it's one person, then we would know who that person was. But we could know that more openly in the public. I mean, that's what people are asking for, so they can help us problem solve.
Thank you. Trustee Coughlin.
Quickly on this slide, and I may have missed this when I stepped out, but the chief of staff number, was that addressed? Okay, so could you clarify what departments are within the chief of staff? Perhaps the chief of staff.
Okay.
Or maybe maybe this is like a good information for next time.
Yeah, I don't need that. I guess I
trustees-
don't need the full
I
answer
think,
now because
not just trustees, but especially the public seeing.
I go back to this idea of the importance of the transparency
Yeah.
and the communication, and people see the slides, right, and they interpret what they see based on, because that's the information we gave them. A chief of staff typically has a staff member, maybe. I mean, the chief of staff is the staff member who works for the superintendent. This looks like we have the most bloated central office in the entire universe if we have that many people working in the chief of staff office.
The comms
I know
department?
that a lot of people report to the chief of staff, right?
Part
So I
of-
I don't need the answer today because I think fewer people are going to watch the meeting than who view the slides.
Yeah,
So if
I
you could
think-
just update that, particularly for the budget workshops in the public, and itemize that by department, but so that people don't think that that's just bloated.
I do
central
think
office.
it's important to note, though, that part of the reason athletics falls in talent strategy, and the chief of staff has 76 people who might report to her, is because of the cuts that we have made over time, right? And so where, some of those positions
Okay,
that
but-
report to the
But
chief
nobody
of staff.
cares what department it is, and they care about what the work is that's being done.
Correct.
And so don't report it by the person who they report to, report it by the function that they serve. So athletics is athletics, it's not human capital. Whatever the department is under the chief of staff doesn't do chief of staff stuff. That is not what they do. They do
They answer the
academics,
phone
and they
for
do
enrollment.
school
Yeah,
operations.
communications,
For sure.
Office
Thank you.
of Innovation and
Yeah.
Development, OID, yes.
Accountability,
So all those things. So
some of those
just- I
report to the
suggest
chief
you
of
just
staff
break
right
it down
now.
so, because we get so many questions about the bloated central office and how cuts being made there. So we need to provide accurate information to people about who those people are and what work they do, and then help people help us and help others. So that's my request, is to break that one down.
For sure.
And then similarly, well, also, I would like to request an update on the cuts, because people are asking, in the feedback that you shared, people are asking for central cuts to be made prior to the campus cuts. I would like an update on the cuts that had, and our answer has been, we made significant cuts to central office last year for a savings of X amount. I would like an update on that to see, okay, what does that currently look like? Like when you consider the cuts were made then and then any additions that have been added back since then, like where are we now in relation to where we were last year in central office cuts? How many of those cuts were real cuts, like we actually cut something rather than we just didn't spend something, right? Because that's a very different thing, If I have, whatever, I don't need an analogy, but if a cut of something that we weren't spending doesn't hurt the same way that a cut of something that we are spending. So I would like to understand better just kind of where we are with an update on the kind of the current reality of the central office cuts that have been made. And then just real quick, since I came back, on the previous slide, there's a reference to TIA. What TIA expenses are there that aren't actually funded fully from the TIA allotment?
I think one of the interesting understandings about TIA is that it is not a separate account that comes in, like, it's not a separate pocket of money. What TEA does, or what the state does, is when we're allotted, for example, we earn $6.3 million in TIA, that is actually, it comes to us as a deduction from our recapture. Right, so it's a discount, if you will, from the reduction. It's not necessarily, they don't send us $6.3 million.
But I guess my question is, why is it listed as an expense at a cost?
Because it still comes out of our 199.
But if we didn't spend that, then we wouldn't get the allotment. So we'd actually be net losing 90% of that.
So this number, I understand what you're saying, but this number, this is all expenditures. This is to get us back to our old operating expenditure total number. And in that, so you're right, the recapture number offsets it, but then this is part of the operating expenditures because this is a payroll expense.
Okay.
Okay?
But is it something that could be cut? Could we just say we're going to cut TIA and save $6.3 million?
No, we don't want to do that.
I know we don't want to do that, but I'm saying, could we even do that? Because if we can't, then why would it be listed on there?
I mean, theoretically, you could back out of the program.
And save $6.3 million?
They would net out as zero,
You would not have
right?
to budget for it, right? So
I get what you're saying, Dr. Carr. Like, this just isn't the type of information that's useful to the
Yeah, it's not useful to
community
put
and for
something on there that we
decision-making.
can't do
we
anything
can't
with
cut.
or about. So it just, that's all I'm saying. So thank you.
And President
Thank you.
President
Anyone else
Russell,
on this? I have some thoughts about this one. Before we move on, does anyone else have anything before I share my thoughts? Okay, perfect. Sorry, can we go back to slide 9, please? Or ahead to slide 9, please? Yes, this I have a couple of thoughts about before we move on, and then I have a slightly different take on the deputy. I fully support pausing on the deputy superintendent of operations. I remain very interested in a deputy superintendent of teaching, learning, and learning. But would love to consider if we can support that cost by reducing some of the layers in between our principals in that position. That is something I've heard from principals that they would not feel, especially on their campuses, that we haven't always had that many layers. The superintendent can share what he thinks the impact would be on student learning. I think I'm hearing one thing from campuses. I might hear something different from him, but that is a question I have, is what the impact would be. And having someone at the top as we're working on academic vision, trying to answer these questions of how we can have more people and fewer opportunities at some of our campuses, what that looks like, I think would be valuable. I would love to see departmental non-staffing budgets for all of these. I remain extremely interested in looking at what we can cut with technology. I have been told that work is being done. I do not think we should have one-to-one devices everywhere. I understand the devices can be bond funded. I do not believe the software is bond funded. And I heard from a friend the other day who, said a kid was on YouTube all day. And the teachers didn't know, and that was on a district-issued device. We should not have access to YouTube on our devices. We should not have Minecraft on our devices. These are programs intended to hijack all of our brains. And we need to not have them in our kids' hands. We should not be paying $500,000 a year to replace chargers. I have a lot of feelings about this. I think our students will do better with less time on screens. I have been visiting schools all over the state this year with a special TASB program. It has been striking how few screens I have seen in classrooms all over the state in schools that are thriving with populations that look like ours. So I would love to see that departmental budget and understand what might be brought to us for savings there. I'd like to see all the departmental budgets. I also have an interest in understanding in a moment where we are really struggling financially, understanding legally, and this is a legal question probably more than anything, what is our obligation with one police officer for every single campus? And if we have a financial struggle, what kind of waiver might we be able to apply for? What kind of statement might we be able to make sure we are doing what we need to keep our students safe, but not spending money on police that really could better go to the classroom? And if that's a place we might consider some reductions to our budget, if that makes sense with safety and if it is legal. That is an unfunded mandate that I know we are spending a massive amount of money on. Those are some of my main questions when I see this slide. So thank you for that. And then other costs at district level, I'd love a better sense of what's in that bucket. Thank you. And slide 8. And if we can see our stipends and allowances really detailed out. I think cell phone allowances should just go away. I think that's an artifact from when cell phones were rare and expensive. That doesn't make a whole lot of sense to me anymore. And I think anyone who receives a cell phone allowance is paid enough to have a cell phone plan. My zookeeper kid pays for his cell phone plan. Like people in well-paid positions can pay for their own phones, and I'd love to have a sense of the stipend, and I am hearing so loudly from people that those stipends are essential for retention of our Spanish-speaking staff, of our staff who support our special education students. I would be interested in knowing how many of our staff who receive a Spanish stipend for being bilingual are actually using that to support our students, and how many may not be. I think that would be valuable, a valuable bit of detail to have. I have also heard a real call for ARD facilitators, and for people asking if we were to reduce special education stipends, if we could use some of those savings to provide ARD facilitators. That would make a profound difference. And I've heard a real concern about that with going to 7 of 8, that some of our teachers will have to be pulled out of their classes away from their students to do arts, that teachers will get less class time. And then finally with, and this isn't on this slide, but with looking at changes to planning time at elementary school and high school, if we reduce planning time, where else might we find some in a different way? We had talked about creative systems. There's a neighboring district that has early release on Fridays to allow for secondary planning time. You know, what other models? We had talked about early release on Wednesdays for elementary planning time. I'd also love to understand if we get rid of all everyday PE for our students, how many instructional minutes we get back. Because we have been hearing about that, and we know that instructional, time in instruction matters. So I think that would be a helpful thing to understand as well. Thank you.
Hey, Lynn, thank you for the technology, and I'm glad Trustee Foster walked back in, because that is also something that I asked about a year ago, to bring all of those devices back in. And here's the thing that this is where I have struggle and frustration, when I know for a fact, I know 3 schools, students are not allowed to take the devices home, but all of the other middle schools are. See, it's that kind of thing, that's what rankles me. I'm rankled, okay? That costs a lot of money. You're right, those chargers, my kid's last one just broke. I was like, just take the computer. The school let her take it. She's almost through. But with the technology, I think we can save some. Also, we do need to back up off that technology. But that's a policy. That's a policy that we have to have. And we already know That's something the policy committee we're happily ready to take on. But we already know, especially for those people who don't live in the world of EC through 6, teachers are about to have to start teaching cursive again. Yeah, so all of those new things are coming. TEA is making lots of wonderful plans. You can't do that on an iPad. I mean, maybe you could, but these are the things we're moving backwards to what actually work, the good stuff that work.
Yeah.
I love technology. I teach an educational technology foundations class. Sometimes you just got to do pencil and paper.
There's an important place for it in our schools. COVID was
already
the
know the
best
brain
thing that
effect.
happened to ed tech.
So I appreciate that. Thank you for mentioning that.
Thank you.
And you got my other one on what the allowances were, because is that just, my question was, is that just, because I know I've been hearing cell phone allowances, but is that like mileage? Because you run in your car, which, I'm not against mileage. I think that's fair. If you're going to campuses every day, if you're, driving, that's wear and tear on your car. That's gas money. So is that something that's an employee allowance, or is that that's not in there?
It is, we have some employees, principals and up, who receive a cell phone stipend.
I mean, that's all that is?
Yes. And we spend about $130,000 a year total on cell phone stipends.
Can I ask how much it is individually? Because I feel like they got satellite phones.
It's in our compensation manual, and I will look that up for you.
Okay.
I don't have it off the top of my head. But we don't necessarily purchase the cell phone itself. It's
No, I understand that, but I'm saying that number seems like everybody has a satellite phone. That's a really big number for a cell phone allowance. I got 4 people, and I'm $250. What do you? What? Yeah. What?
I'm sorry, are you asking if?
I'm asking what's in the employee. Does it, can I not read that number? What does that number say? Is that an M next to that number? $500,000.
What's an employee?
So that is what that number says, correct?
That's also including travel stipends.
That's what I'm asking.
Yeah,
I just asked
it includes
Sale and travel.
Yeah, sale and travel.
See, that's what I'm asking. That's
I
what I'm
just
saying,
wanted
like,
to,
what is that?
while we were talking about, so mileage
Yes.
is if I'm traveling to a conference. I'm sorry, I'm not answering.
This is exactly what Dr. Kaufman just said. Because
Going deeper.
That's what I was like. That's because I'm at ACC and I know we go see teachers. We get paid that mileage, right?
Correct.
So I'm like, people see that and they're like, what kind of cell phones do they have?
Right.
Right? And so that is mileage. That's wear and tear. Like, I'm not against mileage. I don't think anybody would be against mileage if people are going from campus to campus serving teachers and students.
Right.
So if we knew what that number was, then for me, I would be like, I don't want to touch that number. But if it's like to have lunch every third, like doctor's offices do, I'm like, you bring a sandwich. I've said that for the board. I've said that, right? I've said we can bring some sandwiches. Right. I appreciate the food, but you bring some bread, I bring some whatever.
Bring some what?
Yeah, I'm just saying that people need to know what those numbers are, and we need to know what those numbers are so that we're like, let's break that number out. These 3, no. These 3, we're on board.
Thank you. And I think Trustee Foster, then Trustee Kaufman.
Yeah, I just,
Trustee Kaufman, then Trustee Foster. Sorry.
Oh, I'm sorry.
I saw Kevin
Just super
first.
fast, can I just acknowledge, like, I think, obviously with the number that we're dealing with, we have to aim for the big items,
Yes.
right? And I want to highlight the ethical importance of looking at the small items also, right? So if I'm saving $1 million by cutting school lunch program, but I'm spending $500 on food for me, that $500 cut is an ethical cut, right? I can't sit here and feast while I'm cutting $1 million as funding, even if it only saves $500. So I just want to say that the small cuts are extremely important symbolically and ethically.
Thank you. Okay.
just with regards to the technology, that ends up being the one-to-one technology conversation. To me, that's an example of an opportunity for the introduction of nuance that could actually improve this teaching and learning setting. So if you go to, I guess I saw somewhere a slide on program-based support. So instead of one-to-one, straight one-to-one technology, you got your cows or you got your classroom set, and you affect some savings. But according to some of the teachers, you also impact accountability, just kind of the soft learning of students when we start doing things like saying you lose a charger, you're gonna pay for it. or there's actually a fee associated with breaking things or losing things. Or somebody gave me the story of, Jeremy's Chromebook was broken. How was it broken? Well, because Bobby threw it out the window, threw the backpack out the window as a joke and broke the Chromebook. And we don't have any accountability for that. We just have that is what it is. And so we're probably not teaching accountability. We're probably not seeing the best outcomes for students when they just can kind of willy-nilly do these things. And we might be able to affect savings by not doing away with technology, but by being much more nuanced at how we use it. And then the last piece, and this is actually kind of an open question, as you all, and as we all, and as the community comes together and introduces the nuance in all of these lines, how do we, or can we, communicate this? Or is it just information overload? And it's almost like it's a real question for me. Because what I'm finding is that when I have a conversation, I'm sitting with 4 or 5 teachers, or I'm sitting in a coffee shop, or I'm sitting with whoever, and we talk through these things, well, that's an extended conversation. And we often and typically get to really good spaces. It's like, oh, you all are doing this. Oh, they're doing that. Oh, I get it now. That happens quite often, but there's only so many hours in a day and so many cups of coffee I can consume, in one day as I, kind of sit and chat with folks. So I do wonder, honestly, A, go forth with the nuance. Well, B, how do we communicate the nuance so our community gets it? And it's a theme that keeps coming up. Trustee Hunter's talking about it. Trustee DSD talks about it. But I wonder, is this in our slide decks? Is this in our presentations? Or is it just too much nuance? Because what you're hearing from the board is we want the nuance, but maybe it's too much. And this is almost an open question.
And I think there are other places it could be put. It doesn't have to be in a slide deck. It can be in attachments. We know our community wants to go deep. I think a deeper understanding, I've heard our community ask for the entire budget to be put online, line by line, so people can really understand. We have had, at points in the past, budget committees that have combed through our whole budget in collaboration with the administration and the board. This may be a moment next year when we want to bring that back. So I know we have the budget task force that has been doing some help too, but it hasn't been kind of line by line looking and, kind of bringing a different set of minds to it. We're in desperate times, and I think we have to think about everything. So I think there are important questions of kind of how we manage the quantity of information. Not everyone wants the flood. Some people want the flood, and I think as trustees helping us understand where we're going, I think we are hungry for that detail and to be joint problem solvers. And I know Trustee Willie Chu has spent time with line-by-line budget in a really really detailed way. So thank you. And I would like to say too, back to the technology just briefly, last year we talked about, we have multi-year contracts. We had talked about some strategic abandonment in alignment with a real focus on student outcomes, where we're getting them, where we are not, what teaching, leading, and learning believes we need, what we're hearing from our campus, and an update on where we have landed with some of that. I know some of that was considered last year and done. But where we may be with some of that and reconsidering that, or I may be remembering incorrectly. But we're paying for a lot of products, and we need to be paying for as many people as we can. And not that the technology doesn't have a place, but I feel like we may be out of whack and out of balance, and would love the administration's thoughts about what's serving our students and what we could lose and do better other ways and save that money for other places. Thank you. Anyone else? Have we answered helpful questions? Do you think there's valuable, is there anything else that would be of use?
I think the information we've received has been valuable, especially with us knowing where to land with the fund balance. We talked about the property value decline, where we would like to see there, and then to see that board wants to see more detail. And so we can definitely provide that as we're going through, I believe, like the last 2 weeks, we've been going line by line items over our budget, so we can definitely provide that additional information.
Okay, and if we are going to shift to that 15%, I know that's a shift in what we've been talking about just in response to how desperate we are, honestly. And I would love for you to bring back to us, with the superintendent, a plan for honoring the promise we made in our policy to get back to a 20% fund balance by the deadline we've set for ourselves. So I know that will change the trajectory of that and what we need to do to get there. And I would appreciate that. And then I think for us as a board, I think one of the other questions I have for us is with property monetization. That is one of the only ways we have to generate money. It's a one-time problem, and we lose something really meaningful every time we do it. And do we feel like we're hitting the right balance on that right now? So I think that's a future conversation to have as we work through all of these really hard things. Okay, thank you. Anything else before we close?
I just want to make a suggestion. I always do this, and I was good today. The sound didn't come out. So, but I always go, there are 94 people, right? 89 now. That was quick. They said, I'm done. 91 back. Oh, they're just popping up. But going and seeing the comments that people are making, there are some really good questions here. Still some confusion about that taco truck. Y'all gonna have to do better. People are not getting that. But that's okay. Yeah, the contract is like, it's not necessarily the one, but anyway, y'all gonna have to explain that because that was not clear. Somebody was saying that NISD's waiver for the police was approved. So I mean, this is what I'm saying. These people are on it. There's some wonks like us out there. I mean, that's how most of us got here. We were just rando people too. But I think it's important for the district to go and see these questions, and on the one that the district does where people get to ask, they don't really answer the questions, but they put questions in. You got to go through it all. You got to kind of see, and there's some good stuff in there. And that's some of the questions I ask on the board meeting. I'm just reading them off the screen because it's a good question.
Yeah,
So
our community is engaged and wise, and thank you from all of us to all of you for being out there and engaging and caring. And thank you to everyone. Thank you to our staff who are out in the community having budget meetings online, and thank you to everyone who is sharing their time to show up to them. That is deeply, deeply appreciated. And I really appreciate everyone who's going out and making that happen. Thank you. Okay, we will now recess the open meeting at 8:26 p.m. and move to executive session pursuant to Texas Government Code sections 551. Do we need, we don't need any executive session. We are not going to go to executive session. Secretary Foster, do I have a motion to adjourn the meeting?
I do want to acknowledge someone who's sitting up there who will be.
Oh, thank you. Yes. May we? Thank you.
So thank you, Ms. Presley, for all your time with the district as you move on. And next.
Thank you. You guys have been absolutely wonderful, and I'm keeping my home T-shirt. No one gets those, and I will wear it often. Thank you.
Austin will be here. Thank you.
I move to adjourn.
Thank you, Trustee Foster. And the meeting is adjourned at 8:27 p.m. Thank you.